Hello, and welcome to Sir's Bakers. Today we're going to be making pumpkin pie. This is my favorite pie, and a perfect pie for fall and winter time. So, let's get into it. Now there's two ways to deal with the pumpkin. You can either stab it a bunch of times and roast it that way, and the reason you stab it is so that some steam can release and it doesn't explode, or you can cut it up into wedges and just roast the wedges so that you can blend that later. I like to do the wedges because you don't want the center where the seeds and that slimy bit is, and it's a lot easier to get all of that off without taking any of the flesh than it is once it's already roasted. And if you just poke the holes in it and you do that, it's very easy to get the seeds and the slimy bit off, but a lot of the times you take some flesh with that and you waste a little bit. So I prefer to do the wedges. So first off, to do this, we're going to take this bit off. Because this will be in your way a lot of the times. We're going to cut this in half. Also, remember, pie pumpkins only. Regular pumpkins that you use for jack-o'-lanterns and stuff is not the right pie pumpkin, and it will actually not work and taste kind of starchy. This is a lot sweeter, will make a way better tasting pie. Be very careful, as it is hard to cut open. If you ever seen a pie pumpkin versus a regular pumpkin, the flesh is a lot lighter, nice and yellow color, and is a lot different than a normal pumpkin used for jack-o'-lantern. So let's grab a spoon and take this stuff out. You want to keep this, but get rid of this stringy bits and the seeds. If you want, you can keep the seeds, roast them up. They taste great, but if you are just doing this for baking, then there's no need for the seeds or any of that stuff. So we'll just come back when I'm done scraping all this out. Once you get to this stage, make sure you always cut from this side. If you're cutting from this side, your knife can slip a lot easier on the outside skin, where the inside flesh, your knife will go through very easily and just cut nicely. So make sure you just cut like so. If you do it this way, I'll try and show you, be very careful. You see how it's a lot harder and a lot less accurate. It's a lot easier and safer to cut this way. So we'll come back once all these are done. I'm just going to put them on my tray. Make sure there's a nice space between them so air can circulate throughout the thing and cook everything fully. Here they are. If you need to, cut the ends off so that it's a lot easier to handle while you're cutting it. You don't always have to do that. I do have space in between them, very little, but still enough for the air to circulate, and this will be perfect. So we're going to roast this for 15-20 minutes at 400 with convection. It'll differ depending on your oven, all those factors. So maybe go between 15 and 25 minutes just to be safe. What you want is it to be soft and to be able to peel off the skin. You could technically peel the skin now, but after you roast it, it should just come off super easily, and you don't need to peel it and waste all that time. So let's put this in the oven and come back when it's done roasting. Here's all the pumpkin. Just use a spoon to scrape it off the skin and make sure that you don't have any pieces of skin. Anything small like that isn't going to blend properly. If you're doing this at home and you're using a canned pumpkin, you can just go with the amount I have in the recipe, but when you're using a fresh pumpkin, it's going to vary in size and you're going to have to spice it up differently. The other thing you need to keep in mind is I always do this by taste. So yes, I have a guideline with my recipe, but depending on how sweet the pumpkin is, etc., etc., I do change my spices just a tad bit to suit and balance the pumpkin. So this is all the spices, your ginger, your nutmeg, cloves, allspice, cinnamon, and your salt. Just spread that around. We're going to blend this up, and then we're going to put it back on our tray. So don't wash this tray or anything. Roast it again, and that will get this spices soaked into that pumpkin and make it taste really nice. Once we have all that done roasting, we'll put our sugar, our vanilla, cream, everything in here, and then put it into our pre-baked pie shell. Once this is done baking, I'll quickly roll out my dough so that I can pre-bake it while I'm mixing everything else together. But first, let's blend this up. All you do is blend until it's nice and smooth. Now all we gotta do is put this pumpkin back onto our tray and spread it out. I roast this for another 20 minutes. Any longer and it dries it out too much. And if you don't go 20 minutes, you don't get that same rich flavor. So keep that in mind. You can go over if you go 25 minutes or so. Maybe add a little bit more cream or egg to make sure the liquid's back in it. But keep in mind that you want to spend at least 20 minutes to get that nice flavor. So we'll throw this back in 20 minutes, and while this is going, I'll start rolling out my dough. Get that in the pan, ready to go in the oven. Throw it in the oven right after this is done. Start mixing everything in for this. Pour it into a pre-baked pan, and we're good to go. So let's roll out our dough. Now this is an uncovered pie, and also a pre-baked pie. So you need to make sure you pre-bake this before you put the pumpkin inside of it. We're gonna bake it about 50% of the way done, and then bake the rest with the pumpkin inside. If you bake with just the pumpkin inside right off the hop and don't let it pre-bake, your bottom will be all doughy and raw. So make sure that you at least pre-bake this one. So let's just put this on top. And because it's an uncovered pie, we're going to make sure we cut extra on the bottom so we can make a nice crimp. With pies like pumpkin and strawberry where there's absolutely no topping, like there's no lattice or anything, you have to be extra careful with how much dough you have on the side, because that's the only part that is going to look any different than your pie itself. With the lattice, you can get some design, looks nice, but if you have a little weird crimp spot here or anything like that, it's going to look fine because you have the lattice or the topping. But with the strawberry pie and pumpkin pie, you don't have that topping to help you in any way, shape, or form. So you need to make sure that you're making everything even, making everything look good, not rushing. Spend a good time here. Your pumpkin pie or your pumpkin should still be roasting, so you have plenty of time, no need to rush. If you're noticing you have extra dough, just snip a bit off. There's no reason to put too much, but there's also no reason to put too little. So cut big, and then if you decide that you want a little bit off, like so, cut a bit off as you go. That way, everything looks even. So we'll just crimp this now. Put our baking beans inside. The other thing is, because there's nothing inside yet, it makes it a lot easier to crimp. So there is absolutely no excuse to have ugly crimp on your pumpkin or strawberry pie. Now we're gonna put our we'll egg wash first so that we know we have everything egg washed, and then we'll put in our baking beans. I always like to have everything on a tray. It just stabilizes yourself. So when you are moving this around, you don't have to hold just this little bit, and because this is tin, it could bend, things like that. This is a lot more easier and nicer. Also, your hands and stuff don't ever get near the pie, so when you're taking it out, you're not touching everything. You don't want to be spreading germs or anything like that. Now this is egg wash. You obviously don't need to egg wash the middle. You're not going to be you're not going to be seeing that. But grab your saved parchment paper and pour your rice or baking beans . Remember, you want to bake this with as much beans as possible, because that will ensure a nice fully cooked dough. These are just for my tarts, so I like to keep them as well whenever I make fruit tarts. It's always a good idea to keep these so that you don't have to keep reusing a whole bunch of different ones. So I'll just clean up. I'll actually put this in the fridge while I wait for my pumpkin to finish, which should just be a few more minutes. And then I'll put this in right away. Here's the pumpkin just coming out. Because this is fresh, again, I don't have the exact amount on here, so I'm gonna have to weigh out to make sure I get the exact amount. And as you can see, it's a lot drier now, so if you do go a little bit further, you gotta be very careful or you'll have it way too dry. But you'll start to smell a very, very strong smell, which is exactly what you want. I forgot I weighed it with this, so I'm gonna have to take a little bit out. There we are. So that's all the pumpkin I need. Now, when you're at your bakery, fresh pumpkin lasts a lot longer than roasted pumpkin. So try to just keep it as a pumpkin. But if you're doing this at home or at a bakery and you have to use the pumpkin, but you don't need all of it, you should probably put this in jars or in a container and freeze it. If you put it in the fridge, it might last a week at max. Anything longer than that and it'll probably go bad. So make sure that you're either freezing it or using it very quickly. It should still work perfectly fine from frozen, but just keep in mind that it can still freezer burn, so don't just keep this from 1 year to the next. Because normally you're cooking pumpkin pie at the end of the year, and if you're gonna hold that from December all the way to next December, people aren't gonna be happy with that. So I'm just gonna jar this up, put it in the freezer. Also make sure this is very hot, so when you put it in your jars, don't just put it in the freezer right away. Let it fully cool down and then put it in the freezer. Other than that, you should be ready to go to start mixing everything else with your pumpkin. Let's get this done. Here's my half and half with my vanilla, my eggs. We'll put the sugars in first. This is a perfect opportunity to make sure that your pumpkin is nice and smooth. No lumps. Remember, you've now roasted this twice. There shouldn't be any lumps whatsoever because it should be very, very soft now. And then we'll just quickly add everything else in. You don't have to pour one at a time. You can do both. There's no acid, so you don't have to worry about your eggs or your cream curdling or anything like that. Now mix this up. Make sure all the pumpkin is off the walls. Remember, that's all your flavors, your pumpkin, because it has all your spices in it that you just roasted. So if you lose any pumpkin, all it's going to taste like is sugar and cream, which doesn't taste bad, but it's not a pumpkin pie. So keep that in mind. And there we are. We're all mixed up. Just have to wait for our pie shell to be pre-baked. Pour this in. So we'll come back when our pie shell is ready. Here's the shell. Almost fully cooked. Perfect. Give this a nice stir just to make sure there's no separated bits. And then pour it into your shell. This will puff up, so if you go any higher than this, it's going to overflow and be a mess. So make sure that you don't go anywhere past this amount. So let's quickly get this back in the oven. We're going to cook it on high and then turn it down and then slowly cook it for the rest of the time. So let's get baking. For pumpkin pie, we want to let it cool down slowly so it doesn't get a nice crack, just like what you do with cheesecake. So this is now done. It's now puffed up nicely, you see that? And that will slowly shrink back down to the level that you had it. But we're gonna let this sit in here, slowly let it cool down so that when it shrinks down and is nice and flat and there's no big cracks. All these little cracks that you see on the side will disappear as it shrinks. But if you cool it down too quickly, there's going to be huge cracks and you can't fix that. So we'll just let this slowly cool down in the oven, and I'll take it out after that and we'll talk about it at the end. Here's how it turned out. Nice and level now, looking good. I won't be taste testing this because I'm going to be giving it away to my brother. But the main things you're going to want to look out for this is what spices, like how much of each one. Remember, this is to taste, so if you love cinnamon and only cinnamon, just put cinnamon in. If you like a stronger taste, maybe add more nutmeg, things like that. And always remember, let it cool down slowly so that you don't get any cracks. But this is looking great. Fairly productive day. So, if you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I even have my own website. Thank you, and have a nice day.